In this fictional story, a frustrated Keanu Reeves mutters an insult in Sicilian, assuming the young waitress can't understand a word. When she responds back fluently in the same dialect, he freezes in shame, and the tense moment turns into a powerful lesson in respect, language, and humility. The night the ocean held its breath. You know those evenings when a restaurant feels like the safest place in the world? Plates clinking, quiet conversations, the sea breathing just outside the window like it's keeping rhythm with the people inside. That's how it was at Trattoria del Mare, the night a world-famous action star walked through the door and proved that even the nicest image can crack in a single angry heartbeat. The place wasn't fancy, just stubbornly beautiful. Blue chairs, white tablecloths, hand-painted plates on the wall, the kind of room that smelled of lemon, garlic, and old family stories. Beyond the arched windows, the Sicilian coast glowed under a velvet sky, the waves soft but constant. At a corner table, a group of German tourists laughed over a too-large carafe of house wine. By the bar, the owner, Signor Bianchi, polished glasses with the same tenderness he once saved for his late wife. And weaving through it all was Elena, the young waitress with a dark ponytail, tired shoes, and a heart that refused to harden, no matter how many rude customers she'd met that summer. Elena moved like someone who had too much on her mind, but still remembered to smile. By day, she studied languages at the university in Palermo. By night, she carried plates to tourists who didn't know the difference between Italian and Sicilian and didn't really care. She spoke 4 languages fluently, 5 if you counted the rough, musical Sicilian dialect that had shaped her childhood arguments and lullabies. But she had learned to keep that one quiet around foreigners. Too many times they had laughed at her accent, mocked her words, or tried to imitate them like a joke. Tonight, she just wanted to finish her shift, collect her tips, and send a bit of money to her younger brother, who was dreaming of leaving the island for good. The door swung open without much ceremony, but the room changed anyway. A tall man in a black jacket stepped in, followed by 2 assistants and a nervous driver clutching a phone. His name was Adrian Cole, the kind of Hollywood action star whose face lived on posters in every teenager's bedroom. People said he was the kind one, the humble one, the guy who rode the subway and gave his seat to strangers. On the wall behind the bar, even Signor Bianchi had a faded DVD of one of Adrian's films, the plastic case held together with a strip of tape. For a moment, the trattoria forgot how to breathe. Adrian did not look like the posters. The jawline was the same, the dark hair falling to his shoulders, but his eyes were raw, like someone had dragged him out of a dream he didn't want to leave. There were purple crescents beneath them, and his shoulders slumped under a weight no one else could see. His assistant whispered something in English, and he nodded without really hearing, scanning the room as though he was searching for an exit rather than a table. When Elena stepped forward with the leather-bound menu and the greeting she'd rehearsed 1,000 times, she caught that look and felt a prickle of unease. This was a man used to pretending. Tonight, he didn't seem to want to pretend at all. They took the table by the window, the one every romantic couple begged for. The ocean stretched out behind Adrian like a painting, silver water, black rocks, the distant glow of another village. It should have been a peaceful scene, but the energy around him was crackling, sharp. His driver's hands shook as he poured water. The younger assistant kept checking his phone, his screen lighting up again and again with messages from studio and PR team. Each vibration seemed to tighten Adrian's jaw a little more. When he finally spoke, his voice came out dry. "Just bring me something simple," he told Elena in English. "Pasta, wine, whatever you recommend." Elena forced a polite smile. Simple, she thought, was the one thing famous people never really wanted. In careful English, she suggested the spaghetti alle vongole, fresh clams that had arrived that morning, and a local red that didn't appear on tourist menus. Adrian didn't look at the menu, only nodded, his eyes already drifting past her. She noticed the scrape on his knuckles, the faded bruise under his sleeve when his jacket shifted. Stunt work, she assumed. Action heroes were paid to destroy themselves in beautiful slow motion, then stand up smiling for interviews. In the kitchen, pots hissed and clanged as Elena called the order. Signor Bianchi raised an eyebrow when he heard the name Adrian Cole, then shrugged. "Celebrity or fisherman, they all chew the same," he muttered, dropping the pasta into boiling water. But as the news traveled, the room forgot to pretend it didn't care. The German tourists stole glances over their wine. A young couple near the door argued in hushed whispers about whether it was really him. Even the teenage dishwasher dried his hands on his apron and peeked out, his face glowing like a lit match. While the clams opened in their pan, Elena watched Adrian from the pass window. He was on the phone now, speaking in fast, exhausted English. She couldn't catch every word, but the tone was unmistakable. Anger balanced on the thinnest edge of despair. Something about reshoots, about a stunt gone wrong, about a friend who knew the risks. The assistant tried to calm him, but Adrian's voice climbed anyway, low and tight, like a man arguing with a memory instead of a producer. Elena had seen that look before on the fishermen who lost someone to a storm. It was the look of a man who'd been told he had no choice but to keep going. When she brought the food, the smell of garlic white wine and the sea floated up between them like a peace offering. Adrian's eyes flicked to her for the first time with any real attention. For a second, the movie star charm appeared, a tired but genuine thank you aimed right at her. Up close, he looked even more human, small lines at the corners of his eyes, a faint scar near his lip she'd never noticed on screen. Something softened inside Elena. Maybe he was just another exhausted man, having a bad day far from home. The illusion lasted exactly 4 minutes. The phone on the table buzzed again. Adrian looked at the screen, and whatever he read there dragged the color from his face. He put the phone to his ear and turned slightly away, but his voice slipped out anyway, harsh and low. Elena didn't understand all the English, just pieces. "You can't blame me for that," he signed the waiver. "I am not doing another take, and finally, I can't keep burying people for your box office." His fork hung in the air untouched. Wine trembled in the glass. Around them, conversation slowed, then dimmed. People pretended to focus on their food, their dates, their phones, but the tension leaking from that table spread like spilled oil. Signor Bianchi shot Elena a look that said, carefully, very carefully. She approached with the extra basket of bread, ready with a small, neutral question. "Is everything all right, sir?" The sentence that had saved more nights than she could count. He ended the call without saying goodbye, fingers clenched around the phone so tightly his knuckles shook. When he looked up at Elena, the mask slipped entirely. All the grief, the frustration, the pressure of a studio, a fan base, a dead friend. It had nowhere to go but outward. And the easiest target was the stranger in front of him holding a basket of bread. His assistant started to say, "Adrian, maybe we should," but he cut him off with a sharp gesture. He stared at the plate, at the open clams, at the tiny flecks of parsley, as though they'd personally insulted him. "This isn't what I asked for," he snapped in English, even though it was exactly what he had asked for. "I said simple." The words hit Elena like a slap, but she kept her voice level. "It is our simplest dish, senor. Fresh clams, olive oil, garlic, very traditional." He gave a short, humorless laugh, shaking his head. "Traditional, right." His gaze slid over her name tag, then her apron, then the tired lines at the corners of her own eyes. Something cruel and reckless sparked there, the wild instinct of a man trying to throw his pain at anyone else just to feel lighter for a second. Under his breath, almost a growl, he added a few words in Sicilian. The dialect was rough, the accent clumsy but clear enough. He didn't know she could understand him. He didn't imagine this quiet waitress from a tourist town could possibly recognize the language he'd picked up from a stuntman on set. To him, it was just a secret vent, a way to spit his anger where no one would ever really hear it. But Elena heard every syllable. Every coarse, dismissive word about island peasants and stupid village girl landed with surgical accuracy, slicing straight through the practiced armor she wore to survive double shifts and tourist seasons. Her fingers tightened around the bread basket. The room around them blurred, sound dropping away, until there was only the echo of that insult ringing in her ears and the blood rushing in her head. Her first instinct was the one her grandmother had drilled into her. Swallow it, smile, survive. Service workers had 3 choices: ignore, endure, or lose their job. Yet beneath that old fear, something else moved, steady and hot. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, but the bone-deep certainty that her language, her people, her own tired dignity were worth more than one broken movie star's bad night. She lifted her eyes and met Adrian's full-on. For the first time since he'd arrived, he realized she was not just a uniform. In that split heartbeat, standing there between the ocean and a table of untouched food, Elena made a decision that would change both of their lives. She opened her mouth, drew a breath that tasted of salt and garlic and every childhood memory she'd tried to keep small, and prepared to answer him back in flawless Sicilian. Words sharper than knives. The first word left her mouth before she could decide whether it was brave or stupid. "Kuti criticasi," she said in perfect Sicilian, her voice calm but ringing through the tableware. "Who do you think you are?" Adrian's head snapped up like someone had fired a gun. For a heartbeat, he simply stared, his fork frozen in midair. The entire restaurant seemed to pause with him. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. A chair creaked and then went still. Outside, the ocean kept rolling in and out, but inside Trattoria del Mare, time held its breath. Elena did not raise her voice, but every word carried. "You think if you talk in our dialect, we are too stupid to understand," she continued in Sicilian, each syllable clean and steady. "You come to our island, eat our food, drink our wine, and call us peasants under your breath like we are furniture." His assistant blinked in confusion, lost in the rush of foreign sounds. A couple of locals at the bar, however, turned slowly, faces sharpening with recognition. The teenage dishwasher, still peeking from the kitchen door, had his mouth open, eyes wide. Even Signor Bianchi stopped mid-stir at the stove. Heat burned through Adrian's face, climbing from his collar to his hairline. He understood enough Sicilian to catch the shape of her accusation, to hear the insult he'd tossed out come back at him, polished and precise. It wasn't supposed to go like this. He was the one who controlled scenes, who delivered monologues while everyone else reacted. Now he was the one pinned to the spot, every eye in the room weighing him. He switched to English by instinct, trying to grab for his usual charm. "Look, I didn't mean—" "You meant it exactly," Elena cut in, shifting to English without missing a beat. Her accent was soft, but her gaze did not move. "You chose those words. You thought I was deaf or ignorant or that my language is a joke for you to practice on when you are angry." She drew a breath, feeling her pulse thudding against the thin skin of her throat. "I carry plates, yes. I clean tables, but I speak 5 languages and I pay for my brother's school and my mother's medicine. Do not make me small because your day is broken." A murmur passed through the room, low and electric. The German tourists watched with guilty fascination. The young couple near the door gripped each other's hands. At the bar, one of the older fishermen nodded once, the kind of quiet approval that said more than applause. Adrian's jaw worked, hearing each sentence like a separate blow. The easy apology, that slick public one he'd used 100 times before, stuck in his throat. His pride roared for defense. He was tired, he was grieving, he was under pressure they couldn't imagine. He wanted to say, "You don't know what I lost this week." Instead, what came out sounded harsher than he intended. "You have no idea what I'm dealing with," he said, voice rough. "I came here to get away from—" He gestured at the room, at the world, at nothing specific and everything at once. "From people exactly like you, judging, filming, turning everything into a scene." "Then don't give them one," she replied, and there was no anger now, only a hard, tired wisdom. "Eat, breathe, be human, but don't stand in my home and spit on it in my own tongue." Her last word landed like a gavel. He glanced around and realized, with a jolt of nausea, that she was right about one thing. Someone was filming. Near the entrance, a skinny boy of maybe 16 stood half-hidden behind his parents, his phone angled just enough to catch both Adrian and Elena in the same frame. The red recording light glowed like an accusation. The assistant moved fast, his training kicking in. "Sir, maybe we should go," he murmured, switching to that careful, soothing tone publicists used for celebrities and wild animals. "We can find another place, somewhere quieter." Adrian suddenly felt the walls closing in. The painted plates, the blue chairs, even the sweet smell of garlic and clams turned suffocating. He imagined the headline already forming. "Beloved star berates local waitress in racist rant." He imagined his dead friend Marco's face beside it, the internet stitching their tragedies and his temper into one ugly narrative. A chair scraped behind him. Signor Bianchi had left the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron as he walked toward the table with deliberate calm. The room parted around him. To most tourists, he was just the kindly owner. To Elena, he was family, the man who had quietly slipped cash into her hand the month her father's boat engine died. "Signor Cole," Bianchi began in careful English, his voice colored by years of speaking Italian to guests who never tried to learn a word in return. In this house, we treat everyone with respect. My staff, my customers, my fish. A tiny smile flickered and died. You are welcome to eat in peace. You are not welcome to insult my girl in our own language. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at the untouched plate in front of him. The clams, once appetizing, now glistened like small, accusing eyes. Shame crowded his chest until there was no room for air. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the tile. "I'm done," he said. It was unclear whether he meant with the meal, with the restaurant, or with pretending to be the man on the posters. He pulled a wad of bills from his wallet and dropped them on the table. Too much, way too much, a clumsy attempt to stamp out guilt with cash. Then he turned toward the door, feeling the weight of every stare between his shoulder blades. As he passed Elena, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. There was no triumph in hers, only a complex mix of hurt and something that looked dangerously close to disappointment. That expression cut deeper than any shouted insult. He stepped outside into the night, the door swinging shut behind him with a dull thud. Inside, conversation broke out in a dozen worried whispers. The boy with the phone checked his screen, thumbs moving fast as he sent the video to someone, somewhere, with the speed of a spark catching dry grass. Elena's hands finally began to shake, the delayed tremor of courage spent. She set the bread basket down on an empty table before she dropped it. By the bar, Bianchi rested a hand on her shoulder. "Brava, ragazza," he said softly. "You stood up, but be ready. The world loves a scene more than it loves the truth." She followed his gaze to the door, then to the boy already watching his screen with wide eyes. On the tiny display, frozen mid-frame, she saw herself, jaw clenched, eyes blazing, and Adrian, face twisted with frustration and shame. In that pixelated reflection of their worst moment, she understood something chilling. Whatever happened next would not belong only to this little restaurant or this one bad night. The whole world was about to walk in. Cracks in the armor. The sea looked different when you stepped outside with your heart pounding. The same moon, the same restless water, but sharper somehow, like the night itself was waiting to hear what you'd do next. Adrian strode down the narrow stone steps toward the waterfront, each footfall echoing off the old buildings. The mild Sicilian breeze did nothing to cool the burn in his cheeks. He pulled his phone out before he reached the bottom. There were already 4 missed calls from his agent, 3 from the LA publicist, and 1 from a number he knew was the studio head. The text notifications stacked like falling bricks. Saw a clip. Call me. Now. His stomach dropped, so fast it hadn't even been 10 minutes. He sank onto the low wall that separated the key from the water and finally called his agent back. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring, clipped and furious. "What did you do, Adrian?" He forced a laugh that sounded nothing like himself. "Good evening to you too." "This isn't funny. There's a video. You yelling at some local girl. It's already on 3 gossip accounts, and one of them used the word xenophobic. Do you know what that does to your brand right now, after Marco?" "Don't say his name." The words came out as a growl before he could stop them. His hands were trembling. He pressed his palm to his thigh, trying to ground himself in the feel of rough denim. Images flashed in his head. Marco's easy grin on set, the sickening silence after the stunt went wrong, studio lawyers whispering about liability while his friend lay in a hospital bed that would never see him sit up again. The agent's tone shifted, slightly softer but no less relentless. "Then give me something else to say. You need to get ahead of this. An apology video minimum, heartfelt, humble, the works. They'll eat it up if we move fast enough." Heartfelt, the word tasted bitter. Every apology he'd ever recorded for some publicity misstep passed through his mind, carefully scripted, tested on focus groups, graded by engagement numbers. None of those had involved him insulting someone in their own language. "I'm not doing another puppet piece tonight," he hissed. "Not after. After your stunt double died and the internet canonized you both," the agent cut in. "You think that gives you a free pass to talk down to strangers? I'm trying to save what's left of your career, Adrian. Don't confuse that with cruelty." Silence fell between them, heavy and ugly. In the distance, someone's laughter drifted down from a balcony, oblivious and bright. A small fishing boat bobbed in the harbor, its lantern throwing soft gold over the water. He used to love sights like this. They were why he traveled at all. Now all he could see was a stage he'd failed to control. "Send me the video," he muttered. I'll figure it out." He hung up before the agent could answer. A moment later, the notification pinged. He hit play. There he was, face taut, eyes hard, spitting words he barely remembered choosing. There was Elena, standing small but unflinching, answering him back with a calm fire that made him look 10 times bigger and 100 times more wrong. The video ended just as he shoved his chair back. From a distance, it looked like a storm rising from a chair and walking out. He barely heard the footsteps on the stones behind him. Elena had slipped out through the side door after Bianchi told her to take 5 minutes to breathe. The kitchen noise had become too bright, too sharp. Every clang of metal felt like a critique. She followed the familiar path down toward the sea, telling herself she only wanted air, not another fight. Her sandals slapped softly against the worn steps. When she saw his silhouette on the seawall, phone glowing in his hand, she almost turned back. Let him drown in his own noise, a hard voice inside her said. He'd earned that. But another, quieter part of her remembered the glimpse of raw pain in his eyes when he talked to whoever was on the phone inside, the way his shoulders had sagged, the scrape on his knuckles, the bruise half hidden beneath his sleeve. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. People leak their hurt on whoever is nearest. Don't catch it, but don't forget they are bleeding. She walked forward. "You know," she said, her own voice startling her in the quiet, "if you wanted to practice Sicilian, you could have started with good evening. It's easier than an insult." He flinched and fumbled, almost dropping his phone into the dark water. When he turned and saw her, he looked less like the man from movie posters and more like someone who'd just been dragged out of a riptide. "You followed me?" he asked, too quickly defensive. "This is my town," she replied, leaning against the wall a few feet away, leaving space between them. "The sea is not reserved for your bad moods." He stared at her for a long moment, then huffed a breath that might have been the ghost of a laugh. "Fair enough." The wind tugged at her ponytail, cooled the heat still crawling along his neck. For a while, they simply listened to the water slap against the stone. It was almost peaceful if you ignored the buzzing phone between them and the memory of every eye in the restaurant burning holes in their backs. "You were right," he said finally, surprising them both. The admission seemed to cost him something. "About what I said, how I said it, I'm sorry." The words were stiff, as if he was unused to saying them without a publicist's cue card. Still, they were real, and they landed differently from the practiced lines she'd heard tourists use when they knocked over glasses or snapped at staff. She watched him carefully. "Are you sorry because you meant it and got caught?" she asked softly, "or because maybe you didn't mean it but said it anyway?" He swallowed. No one on his payroll had ever asked him that. They asked how he wanted to frame things, what angle he preferred, whether he'd like to show vulnerability to test engagement. This felt more like being X-rayed. "I'm sorry because I knew you wouldn't understand," he began, then corrected himself with a wince. "No, because I thought you wouldn't, and that made it feel safe to be cruel. I was angry at someone else and you were there, and I thought, what does it matter? She won't know." "That is worse," she said, but there was no triumph. "Because it means you know better and chose not to be better." He held her gaze, then nodded once. "Yeah, it does." The candor startled her. For the first time, she saw not just a rich foreigner having a tantrum, but a man who'd spent too long being applauded no matter what he did. Fame had wrapped around him like armor, but armor, she knew from her grandfather's stories, grew heavy if you never took it off. "What are you dealing with?" she asked cautiously. "Inside the restaurant, you said I had no idea." His throat worked. The words clung there thick. Telling a stranger about Marco, about the stunt, about the guilt that sat on his chest every morning like a concrete block. None of that would change the fact that he'd chosen to throw his pain at her. Yet oddly, looking at her, he wanted to explain anyway. "I killed my friend," he said finally, voice ragged. Not directly, but I pushed for a bigger stunt, more realism. I said he could handle it, he said he could. The studio wanted it, the fans expect it. The director was nervous, but I insisted." He stared at his hands like they belonged to a stranger. The wire failed, he fell, he never woke up. And now the studio wants me back on set, and the internet wants hero stories, and my agent wants me patient and charming, and I had nothing left when I walked into your restaurant. So I dumped all of that on you. The confession settled between them like a heavy coat laid down on the stones. The waves lapped gently, indifferent to human tragedy. Elena thought of her father's boat, of storms he'd faced, of the day the call came that he wasn't coming back. Everyone had said it wasn't anyone's fault, but grief always went hunting for one. "I am sorry about your friend," she said quietly. "That kind of loss, it changes the shape of your days." He looked at her, surprised again. "You don't even know him." "I know the space someone leaves," she answered. "I lost my father to the sea. People blamed the weather, the old engine, bad luck. But I blamed myself for years because I was the one who begged him to go out that morning so we could afford my school books." She gave a small, wry smile. Guilt is a very creative storyteller. Something in his chest loosened at her words, like a tight knot being carefully worked apart. For the first time in months, he felt seen as more than headlines and contracts, and more than the saint or villain the internet kept alternating between. "You still shouldn't have insulted me," she added, because compassion didn't mean excusing him. "No," he agreed, "I shouldn't have, and if that video goes the way I think it will, I'm going to pay for it." He held up his phone, the paused frame of their argument glaring back at him. "They want me to do an apology video, right now, cry a little, talk about growth, thank you for educating me." He made air quotes and grimaced. "And you don't want to?" she asked. "I don't want to perform being sorry," he said. "I actually am sorry. That's new for me in this business." His eyes searched her face in the dim light. This is going to sound insane, would you help me? I mean, I don't want to use you. If I talk to you instead of to the camera, maybe it will be real." Her first impulse was to refuse. The idea of her face, her name, her worst moment, blasted across millions of screens made her stomach twist. She'd seen what the internet did to women who dared to stand their ground. She imagined strangers picking apart her accent, her clothes, her attitude. She imagined her brother at school, seeing his sister turned into a meme. Before she could answer, footsteps pounded down the steps. Adrian's young assistant appeared, slightly out of breath, phone in hand and panic in his eyes. "Adrian," he called, then slowed when he saw Elena. "Good, you're here too. The studio just called. That clip is already on trending pages. They want a live stream apology in 15 minutes. He swallowed, glancing between them. "And they specifically asked if the waitress would be willing to appear. They think it'll look more authentic." Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. Authentic. The word suddenly felt like a knife dressed as a compliment. She looked from the frantic assistant to Adrian, who, for the first time all night, seemed truly stripped bare. No swagger, no practiced charm, just a man in trouble asking for help from the person he'd hurt. "Please," he said, and the single word carried more humility than any scripted speech ever could. She stared out at the restless black water, a dozen possible futures flickering through her mind. Whatever she chose next would not only shape his fate. It would change hers. The choice. The wind curled around them, carrying salt and the faint clink of dishes from the trattoria above. Elena watched the assistant's anxious face, the glowing phone screen, the man beside her who had gone from untouchable icon to very breakable human in less than an hour. Every part of this felt dangerous. "If I say yes," she asked slowly, "what happens to me?" The assistant shifted, caught off guard by the question. You'd be seen with him. People would know you stood up for yourself. It could be good for you. Or," he hesitated, eyes flicking away. "Or the trolls could come, you know how it is, but the studio will handle anything serious, I promise." "The studio will handle," she repeated, one eyebrow lifting. "They couldn't even handle a dinner without breaking your star." Adrian gave a hoarse, surprised laugh, then sobered. "He's not wrong," he said. "There will be noise. You'll get blamed for embarrassing me like I didn't do that myself." He rubbed a hand over his face. "If you say no, I walk back to my hotel, record some polished lie alone, and the world forgets you by next week. I'll still know what I did, you'll still know, but they won't." She imagined that version, him retreating into a luxury suite, lighting perfectly arranged, apology words written by people who'd never cleared a table in their lives. Her turned into a mute extra in the background of his story. The idea made her stomach twist harder than the thought of trolls ever could. "I'm not interested in making you look less guilty," she said. "If I help, it's not for your brand. It's because maybe someone watching will think twice before they treat the next waiter like a punching bag." He looked at her as if she'd just handed him something fragile and undeserved. "Then set the terms," he said quietly. "Yours, not the studio's." The assistant opened his mouth to protest, then shut it again when Adrian shot him a warning glance. Elena thought for a moment, the stone cool beneath her fingers, the tide ticking time below. "First," she said, "no script. No one feeds you lines in your ear, you speak for yourself. If you start acting instead of talking, I walk away." Adrian nodded, "Done." "Second, we do it inside the restaurant," she continued. "In front of the people you actually affected, not in some hotel hallway pretending the world is just you and a ring light." The assistant grimaced. "The studio won't." "The studio can eat my contract," Adrian snapped, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. He turned back to Elena. "What else?" Her gaze settled on the dark screen of his phone, where their frozen argument still glared up from the last frame. "Third, you say my name. Clearly, you don't call me the waitress like I am a prop. And you tell people to leave me alone when this goes viral, not just for tonight, for however long it takes to forget." His throat bobbed. "You're right," he said. "You deserve to be more than a blurry figure in my scandal." She held his eyes for another long second, searching for any sign of insincerity. All she saw was exhaustion and a strange, stubborn hope. "Fine," she said at last, feeling her pulse jump. "We go back, we do it once, my way. After that, you live with whatever comes." They climbed the stone steps together, the assistant trotting ahead to call the studio in a low, urgent voice. The closer they got to the restaurant, the more Elena's legs felt like they were made of sand. This was madness. She was a woman who collected wine glasses, not moments of global attention. Inside, the trattoria had quieted to a low, buzzing hum. Conversations died as the door opened. Heads turned, some curious, some wary, one or two already lined with that cruel, hungry interest people reserved for fresh gossip. Bianchi stood by the bar, arms folded over his chest, face carved from weathered stone. "Allora," he asked, eyes flicking from Elena to Adrian. "The sea bring you any wisdom or just more trouble?" Elena walked up to him, forcing her feet to keep moving. "He wants to apologize," she said, "publicly, live, with me there." She could feel people around them leaning in, invisible ears growing bigger. "I told him we would only agree if you say yes." Bianchi studied Adrian for a long, uncomfortable moment, the way he used to study buyers who came to underpay for his best fish. "You insult my girl in my house," he finally said. "Then you want to use it as a backdrop for your performance." His lip curled. "You actors think every room is a set." Adrian didn't flinch away from the accusation. "You're right," he said. "Tonight I did, but I'm not asking to film your restaurant. I'm asking for a chance to say I was wrong in the same place I did the damage, where you can throw me out if I start lying." The owner's eyes narrowed just slightly at that. Honesty, in his world, was worth more than most currencies. "If I say no," he asked, "then I go somewhere else, record a fake sorry, and you close in an hour and go back to your life," Adrian said quietly. "And in a week, a month, some other tired man will come in mad at the world and think your staff is safe to bleed on because people like me keep getting away with it." He swallowed. "I can't fix that, but I can at least not run from this part." A long breath escaped Bianchi, like air leaving an old sail. He turned to Elena. "You trust him to do this right?" "No," she admitted, "but I trust myself to walk away if he doesn't." For an instant, pride softened his features. She looked so much like her grandmother in that moment, small, stubborn, fire in her eyes. He muttered something under his breath about strong women and foolish men, then nodded once. 5 minutes, he said. "We close the doors, no more customers. Anyone who stays keeps their phones in their pockets. You," he pointed to the assistant, "make sure no one films except the one that needs to." Chairs scraped as a few tourists, sensing the storm wasn't for them, paid quickly and slipped out. Others remained, almost reverent, as if about to witness a strange kind of ceremony. In the back corner, beneath a wall of hand-painted plates, they cleared a small space. A simple wooden table, 2 chairs, no fancy lights, just the warm glow of the trattoria's usual lamps. The assistant propped the phone against a bottle of olive oil, fussing with the angle until both Adrian and Elena were in frame, the ocean a vague, dark blur in the window behind them. The phone screen showed a countdown for the live stream, 30 seconds. A bright red dot waited to begin blinking. Elena sat down, feeling the wood solid under her. Adrian lowered himself into the other chair with a slow exhale, like a man about to jump from a high cliff. Their knees were almost touching. In the tiny reflection of the phone's glass, they could see themselves side by side. The furious star and the girl who answered back, now both suddenly very, very human. 10 seconds. "You can still say no," he murmured without looking at her. "So can you," she replied. 5. The assistant held up his fingers, mouthing the count. The restaurant had fallen completely silent. Even the kitchen burners sounded like they were holding their breath. 3, 2, 1. The red light came alive.